With all this talk of the Wii U coming out, I've been hearing this phrase, asymmetric gameplay, getting thrown around a lot. I've actually seen some publications ask if it's just a fancy new way of saying unbalanced, or if it was just some kind of gimmick that Nintendo has come up with to try to sell more consoles. I'll just answer these two questions right now. No, and no. So what is symmetry and how does it differ from balance? These two things are actually overarching design concepts that have applications in fields ranging from graphic design, interior design, architecture, landscaping, photography, and a bunch of other subjects. But for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to talk about game design here. So jumping right into our examples, we have Karate Champ and Super Street Fighter 4 AE. Karate Champ was a fighting game that was fairly popular once upon a time. It might seem a little lackluster today, but pre-Street Fighter 2 was the greatest thing since Nutella. Was Nutella even out back then? Each player has the exact same moveset, hitboxes, speed, everything. They're even pretty much the same sprite. As far as fighting games go, this is totally balanced and totally symmetrical. If you compare this to Super Street Fighter 4 AE, we have Chun-Li and Blanca. This is usually seen as an even matchup. They're totally different characters with totally different moves, hitboxes, dominant playstyles, everything. Yet they're seen to be about even. This is a textbook example of asymmetric balance. Arguably, the easiest way to achieve balance is to make a game perfectly symmetrical. However, this has the potential to be an uninteresting game. Asymmetry, on the other hand, almost always breeds some kind of interest, be it positive or negative. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of popular games that are also symmetric, but I'd hazard to say that most enduring games feature some kind of asymmetry, even if it's not obvious. Chess, for example, looks like a very symmetric game. You can see as much just by looking at the game board. The white side and black side are mirror images of each other. However, due to the very nature of the game, one factor makes it asymmetric. It's the fact that white always moves first. It might not seem like much, but chess masters have been debating this point for over a century. It's even been given a title, the first move advantage. Articles, books, interviews, speeches, and all kinds of other works have been devoted to debating whether or not white has an advantage, how valuable that advantage is, how it affects the game, and so on. This is a very complicated subject, and while I love chess, I'm nowhere near as skilled as I'd really need to be in order to do this topic justice. However, one way of simplifying part of the problem goes like this. White makes the first move, so in a perfectly played game, white is always one step ahead of black. However, white has to reveal his hand first, so black actually has the chance to predict white's plan and adjust accordingly. White has more initiative, yet black has more information. It comes down to which advantage is more valuable. Since most humans very rarely play perfect games, the advantages will have different implications depending on who is playing and who can better utilize them. The first move advantage might not have much of an effect on lower level players, but between two chess masters it can mean the difference between a win and a stalemate. This is an example of asymmetry making it difficult to tell whether or not a game is actually balanced. While we're still here, I'd like to go back and reference the episode I made talking about balance. I mentioned that balance is ever-changing and it affects lower-level players differently than it affects higher-level players. The same can be said of symmetry. Let's jump back to Super Street Fighter 4 AE. Surely the game must be symmetrical when two players choose the exact same character. I mean, they're called mirror matches for a reason, right? Well, if you broaden the view enough, this might not be true. When a lot of people first start playing a fighting game, they can only do the quarter circle fireball motion on one side of the screen. But when they switch sides, it's like being right-handed and trying to write an essay with your left. It just doesn't happen. The act of being on one side of the screen or the other actually flips the controls, and this can give some players problems. So if two players both prefer the same side, one might have a slight advantage simply by starting out on their favorite side. Even though the mechanics of the game are symmetrical, the players playing the game are not. This, in and of itself, is kind of a cornerstone of human competition, and it's part of the reason why so many of us enjoy watching the Olympics. Or EVO. So some of you are probably foaming at the mouth at this point and think that these examples are too subtle to actually count. Cammy vs. Blanca is nowhere near as asymmetric as, say, Luigi's Ghost Mansion on the Wii U. And yeah, you're right, it's not. So let me give you a few examples of really old asymmetric games, most of which predate the NES, let alone the Wii U. We have Hide and Seek, I Spy, Tag, Simon Says, Keep Away, Red Light, Green Light, Follow the Leader. You're probably noticing a pattern, in that all of these are generally seen as children's games. I'm using them because they're games that almost everybody has played and their simplicity make them easy to analyze. And also, just because they're largely played by children doesn't mean you can't pull out interesting design concepts. So a huge factor of asymmetric design is giving players different roles that have different strengths and weaknesses. In Hide and Seek, you have hiders and you have the seeker. In I Spy, you have the spyer and the guessers. In Simon Says, you have Simon and the not Simons. If you compare this to Luigi's Ghost Mansion, you have the ghost and the humans. In Animal Crossing Sweet Day, you have guards and the villagers. In Chase Me, you have the runners and the chasers. So I just demonstrated that this sort of asymmetry is nothing new when it comes to games in general, but what about video games? Were there any video games before the Wii U that featured this amount of asymmetry? Well yeah, a lot actually. Cat and Mouse on the Magnavox Odyssey, released in 1972, is one of the oldest examples of asymmetric video games I could find. And if you want to jump ahead a few years, you could make Duck Hunt a simultaneous asymmetric multiplayer game. You do this by plugging an NES controller into the second port, and you control a duck while player 1 tries to shoot you with their zapper. Asymmetry in video games is really as old as home consoles themselves. So pretty much every one of my examples so far has been about asymmetry when it comes to competition, but there's also a concept called Asymmetric Co-Op, where you have a multiplayer co-op game, but the player characters have different stats and abilities. You usually see this sort of thing in beat-em-ups like Final Fight, but games anywhere between Goof Troop to Kirby Superstar to Mario Galaxy feature it. While there is a lot more to say about the topic of asymmetry as a whole, I think I might save all that for a later episode. So let me leave you with this. Asymmetric game design is nothing new. It's not a synonym for unbalanced. It's not exclusive to video games, and it's not restricted only to competitive games. All of this being said, the fact that the Wii U allows some players to use the tablet controller alongside players who use the Wii Remote or Wii U Pro controller opens up so many new possibilities in the realm of asymmetric game design that would have been almost impossible in the past. Personally, I'm excited to see what developers will do with all these new tools at their disposal. We've seen a lot of interesting things done on the Wii U already, and I, for one, can't wait to see more.